Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group J3 with group members Ananda Putri Salsabila, Restufiryosa Kaunang, Widya Vita Fitriana, Rizka Saputri, Putri Erarinti, and Al-Hafiidz Masendra, and we will discuss about Al-Qaeda. And next, this is table of contents. First section, background. Second section, Al-Qaeda at true face of radicalism and terrorism. And third section, Al-Qaeda in Islamic perspective. And fourth section, solution. And last, fifth section, conclusion. And next, this background. Here I will explain about definition of radicalism, terrorism, Al-Qaeda, and the cause of radicalism is intolerance, which is condition in which group of people reject different from other group. And first, definition of radicalism. Radicalism is one of the problems facing many countries in the world. Radicalism, especially in the political context, is associated with extreme view and disruptive social change. The essence of radicalism is a concept where the attitude of the soul encourages change. Radicalism is a movement that feels violence in the teaching is belief. Islam is a religion that always teaches peace in the spirit of religion and political understanding. Between radicalism and terrorism are different things, where radicalism is policy and terrorism is part of the policy. Therefore, radicalism is considered a negative understanding and can even become a dangerous extreme movement. And then definition of terrorism. Terrorism is an act that uses violence or threat of violence that create an atmosphere for terror or widespread, which can cause mass casualty and cause destruction of strategic vital objects and environment, public facilities, or international facilities by ideological, political, or security disturbance. And radicalism and terrorism are complex issues that is both can bring a room for debate and different interpretation according to the context, intolerance, and condition that accompany them. In the political context, radicalism and terrorism can caused by the discriminatory treatment of the authorities against certain groups. Such discrimination can be in the form not accommodating the aspiration or desire of the group, resulting in frontal and anarchic action. And then definition Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is Sunni Islamic fundamentalist paramilitary organization. Its main purpose is to reduce outside influence on Islamic interests. Al-Qaeda is classified as international terrorism organization by some countries. Al-Qaeda is an organization of former Mujahideen fighters founded by Osama bin Muhammad bin Awad bin Laden, or who is also often called Osama bin Laden, in 1993. Its name means base or network, and it functions as network of logistical support and weapons for Muslims who fought against the Soviet Union. And then one of the causes of radicalism is intolerance, which condition in which group of people reject different from other group. The story of radicalism may or may not appear act of terror. However, all forms of terror that occur are not only motivated by religious difference in ideology, different in political flow, even difference in view within one religion can lead to radicalism and terrorism. And next will be explained by our friend.
So the next is Al-Qaeda, a true face of radicalism and terrorism. With the first part is, what is Al-Qaeda actually? So terrorism is an action that grows and develops because it is supported by the situation where the life of the society doesn't work conductively. Political pressure, social injustice, economic inequality, and the separation or relationship gap between the government and the people can trigger terrorism. According to the Hudson, he said that planned politically motivated violence towards named targets by underground guerrilla groups aims at influencing large scale of people can be referred to as actions of terrorism. The main actors of action of terrorism are the radical groups with action that they considered as a revolutionary. This definition can then be an explanation of the formations of Al-Qaeda, a terrorist group emergence in 1988 as a result of the instability conditions of Afghanistan society due to the occupations of the Soviet Union at the time. The word Al-Qaeda is an often used term in the 80s among the Islamic radicals from all over the Muslim world to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan. Moreover, as Al-Qaeda is a group of radicalism that widely emerged during and after the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan. It is said that Al-Qaeda is the group of radicals who decided that their suffer did not fully end with the withdrawal of Soviet from Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda was formally established on the 11th August in 1988. Al-Qaeda is a result of discussion between the three radicals, namely Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and Syed Imam al-Sharif. Osama bin Laden, later on famously known as the main leader of the Al-Qaeda. Then the second part is the concept of Al-Qaeda. During its existence and development, Al-Qaeda basically implements several concepts, which are Dar al-Islam is a concept that refers to an area ruled by Muslim and governed by Sharia law. Dar al-Kurf, which includes territories that reject Islam and are referred to as unbelievers. And the second concept is Dar al-Harb, which included areas where there was ongoing or even potential conflict between Muslim force or Islam itself and unbelievers. This concept later became Al-Qaeda's foothold in its activities to counter the external influence of Western values, secularism, and even the Christian and Jewish influence that were considered deviant. So the third part is the goals of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda, as a group that is widely known for the 9/11 terrorist attack, al-Zawahiri, one of the men behind Al-Qaeda, in his writing, Knights Under the Prophet banner, explained that there are stages that can be determined as Al-Qaeda's goals. The first stage is called the awakening. This stage aims to raise the spark of global jihad. This stage was marked by the Al-Qaeda attack toward the World Trade Center or WTC building on September 11, 1991 in New York, US. The second stage, opening the eyes, was said to take place between 2002 and 2006 with the goal of putting the West on the defensive. Moreover, the third stage, dubbed Rising and Standing Up, was said to take place between 2007 and 2010 and included attacks on Israel and Turkey. So the next goals will be explained by my friend Rizka.
Okay, so now I'll be explaining what Widya have explained before. So I'm gonna continue the explanation. So actually, the fourth stage or goals of Al-Qaeda was aimed to create a downfall of opposite Muslim regimes. And it continues by the fifth stage, which is timetable for 2010 and 2013, which is aimed to declare a caliphate system. The sixth stage or goals was dubbed or called as a total confrontation, which is depicted as a complete attack on non-believers. And then the last stage, which is timetable for 2020, is what Al-Qaeda called as a definitive trump, which is the implementation of a worldwide or a global caliphate system. And then the next explanation is about the development and wings of Al-Qaeda. So Al-Qaeda has actually spread in many regions around the globe, especially in Iraq, Somalia, and the Indian subcontinent. Uh, in Iraq, Al-Qaeda group was known as Al-Qaeda in Iraq, or AKI. It was founded by al-Zarqawi in 2003. This group was active in conducting attacks against US-led coalition forces, especially against the US troops. In Somalia, the wing of Al-Qaeda was called the Al-Sahabab, or AS. In addition, in the Indian subcontinent, Ayman al-Zawahiri created another wing of Al-Qaeda in early September 2014. The group is called Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, or AQIS. So, although most Al-Qaeda wings widely spread among these countries, however, it can be a denial that the values and influence of Al-Qaeda have spread beyond those regions. It can be proven by several attacks that are done by Al-Qaeda outside these regions. For example, the attack in the warship USS Paul attack in 2000, the Garbia attack in Tunisia in 2002, as well as the Bali bombings in 2002 in Indonesia, our country, and then another attack could be seen in Madrid bombings in 2004, and then London transport in 2005. Okay, about the further development of Al-Qaeda, it is said that since 2015, Al-Qaeda is no longer a deadly terrorism threat. The number of Al-Qaeda attacks is smaller than in the previous years. The warning development of Al-Qaeda in the act of terror attacks is none other than the death of Osama bin Laden. As we know, Osama bin Laden was not only the leader of Al-Qaeda, but he is also the source of Al-Qaeda founding. Al-Qaeda attack in the world depended heavily on the funds owned by Osama bin Laden. The death of Osama bin Laden, which is in May 2011 in Pakistan, furthered Al-Qaeda influence around the globe. However, faith-based terrorism movements are not necessarily vanish due to the decline of Al-Qaeda influence. In fact, the new phase of global jihad and radicalism is emerging on the surface with new patterns and modes in the global world for this moment. So, for example, the Islamic State of Iraq, or what we know as ISIS, and also the Taliban. And as we know, Al-Qaeda was also very close to the Taliban in Afghanistan. So that's the explanation of Al-Qaeda as a true face of radicalism and terrorism. The next explanation will be explained by my friend.
The material is Al-Qaeda in Islamic perspective. Nowadays, the emergence of radical organizations and struggles in the name of Islam is increasingly happening. The Islamic struggle organization, whose name is quite well known, as has reaped many pros and cons from various public circles around the world, is Al-Qaeda. This organization has launched various major attacks that have shocked the world and are quite controversial because they are considered not in accordance with the principles of humanity and Islam. This organization was founded with the aim of fighting for and uniting Muslims against the US and its allies, or overthrowing a regime that is considered non-Islamic. Saying this from an Islamic point of view, of course, this is not justified and is contrary to Islamic teachings. The birth of Al-Qaeda in the name of Islam in all its activities and the existence of Al-Qaeda is not a solution to the decline of Muslims in the world. Islamic law does not teach violence as has been done by Al-Qaeda so far. Various assumptions and different responses regarding the existence of Al-Qaeda have emerged from all walks of life. Therefore, especially Muslims who believe they will certainly not fall into the misguidance that has been committed. As Muslims who believe are pious and carried out Islamic correctly, they must prove with their hospitality, concern, tolerance, and justice that Islam is a way of life for all human beings. Maqasid al-Shariah, which is an understanding of God's purpose in establishing legal provisions, morality, values, and institution, is Li Sa'adah al-Basariyah, known as Mabadi al-Khamsah. The verse of Al-Quran and Sunnah are understood not only literally but are related to asbab al-nuzul and asbab al-wurud or contextual. Radicalism and terrorism among Islamists are rooted in religious understanding that can be traced to the Khawarij and then Wahhabi groups. This group has an exclusive religious perspective or gulu, which is based on the Hakimiyah doctrine. This view is based on the literal or textual understanding of the text of the Quran and Sunnah. The next explanation will be presented by my friend.
Okay, next is solution from Islam perspective. With the instability of political situation in the country, and the people were getting angry with the government because radical groups taking advantage of the situations. Also, the opportunity to find new sympathizers, strange territories. Therefore, it is important for Muslims to avoid activities or not to participate with suggestions that are radical. Basically, religion teaches people peace and solidarity with each other, mutual respect, build solidarity both in the religion and adherents of religion outside the religion they embrace. As the fact that Islam is a universal and moderate religion that teaching the value of tolerance, which is one of the core teaching of Islam that parallel to other teachings such as love, wisdom, and justice. Al-Quran, which affirms Islam as a blessing for the universe, clearly recognizes the plurality of belief and religions. There is examples that are suspected of being the source of religious radicalism are in the letter Al-Taubah chapter 9, which reads, "Like those who do not believe in Allah or in the last day, and who do not consider unlawful what Allah and His Messenger have made unlawful, and who do not adopt the religion of the truth from those who were given the scripture. Fight until they give the jizya willingly while they are humble." In the Encyclopedia of Islamic Law, to be able to determine the punishment of rebels or radicals, jurists divide the rebels into two forms. First, the rebels who have no armament power and do not control a particular area as their base. For rebels like this, jurists agree to declare the legitimate government might arrest the imprison them until they are conscientious and repent. Second, rebels who control an area and have armed force. Against rebels like this, the government appeals first to surrender and repent. If it still resists, then the government can fight them. Another thing that must be understood in order to overcome and prevent radical behaviors such as Al-Qaeda is to not claim violence in the name of the religion of Islam. In the perspective of Islamic law, behavior that give birth to extreme understanding by expelling it through violence in order to defend its ideology can be considered as al-baghi. In Islamic law, rebel or al-baghi fall into the category crimes which can be subject to the death penalty. If this understanding is drawn into the context of discussion of religious radicalism, it will be found a common view between the perpetrator of treason and the radical perpetrator. If a person or faction rebels against the state for sufficient reason, it is permissible for the head of the state to fight them until they return to the truth. In the fiqh jinayah, the act of makar or al-baghi has been regulated in both the Quran and Sunnah in addition to having been regulated in Islamic criminal law. This act has been discussed in the regulation of Indonesian government, which is commonly referred to in the law as a crime of terrorism. Next will be explained by my friends.
So in conclusion, what has been discussed previously, it can be concluded that Maqasid, which was originally interpreted as guarding religion, soul, mind, and lineage, was narrated as the goal of Sharia to develop and glorify human rights. By glorifying human rights, all forms of crime that endanger human rights are prohibited by Sharia. But terrorism itself cannot be called a guard because it threatens the human rights of others. Guns can defeat terrorists, but education can eliminate terrorism. Education is a long-term de-radicalization solution to this problem. The demographic bonus of young people is also a blessing as well as a challenge. The religious morale of youth today is high, but it is unfortunate when this arises from the misguide many extremist groups. Their religious basis is limited, and their naivety is used as the spearhead of extremism, radicalism, and terrorism. The most obvious impact of this incident is in choosing competent institutions and individuals. Correction of this primordial understanding can only be done through education because the fundamental problem is the problem of terrorism, is the distortion of the interpretation of sacred texts. Although fundamentalism also claim to be enforcing Sharia according to their interpretation, killing other people who are considered infidels with thousands of arguments or hundreds of books to justify it. If it comes out of the principles of Sharia standard above, it can be ascertained that it is not part of Sharia. Caring for young people is urgent today because the majority of intolerance, radicalism, and terrorism movements are driven by the younger generation. Young groups can accept new ideas from Makasih Sharia, create an inclusive paradigm, and provide a correct understanding of Islam without eliminating all treasures. If they neglect to embrace and educate the youth, they can lose their way into the Islamic movement, which tends to choose a radical path in spreading its ideology and religious understanding. Amid a culture of violence in the name of religion that continues to increase sporadically, this is shameful and worrying. Shameful because religion never teach violence, and worrying because correction in religion means that you have lost your mind. The eye becomes useless when the mind is blind. Maqasid, in this context, is the time to take a central role in defeating world terrorism, being an example for other countries in dealing with terror threats. The community is invited to understand God's purpose to give Sharia to mankind as a way of life for the benefit of mankind. Critical power towards Sharia must be built, and finally, when fundamentalist groups claim to be upholding Sharia, we easily answer with Sharia, who's Sharia, because God never wants to destruct the mankind, but to protect the rights of life, religion, and the goodness of his servants. No less important, the pride of Nusantara Islamic culture, such as reciting books at the surau, Ta'lim Assembly, Yasinan, Tahlilan, which have been proven to have taken care of the people's needs to be preserved. Terrorism groups don't like this. By carrying out the Islamic tradition, it is also a step against terrorism. So that's all from our group. Thank you for watching. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.